We made this.
Hello and welcome to Pick a Disc. I am your host Matt Latham, and this is the podcast where someone picks a disc to talk about for whatever reason they want to. And today I'm glad to bring on to the podcast Gaz Jones from the Track One Side One podcast to talk about Therapy's Troublegum. So, yeah, and, we talk about the album, talk about the songs, talk about blah, 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 the usual stuff that you're going to expect for an episode of Bigger Disc. And if you like this episode of Bigger Disc, you can go on back and listen to more episodes of Bigger Disc, because we've got 110 of them, as well as some extra bonus ones that you can go and indulge in. So please go and do that if you haven't already, once you've listened to this one, of course. So, and once you've listened to them, you can then follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, subscribe on your podcast apps, rate us 5 stars on your apps of choice, etc., etc., etc. And there's also a link to a Discord server called the Pick a Discord, that if you want to go and say hello, tell us what you're listening to, introduce us to some music, blah, 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 just do all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think that's all the spiel done for today, I think. Let's go and talk to Gaz. Just before we start recording, my headphones suddenly decided to play up, and there was like a lot of miming and very non-podcast friendly things. But my guest for today, Gaz, was able to kind of like mime that things were working and not working and stuff. So, how you doing, Gaz? How you doing, Gaz? You okay?
I'm very well, mate. You're coming through loud and clear and perfect stereo. It's an absolute pleasure to be hanging out with you this fine evening, mate.
Thank you ever so much, and it's a pleasure for you to agree to slum it with the Pick a Disc. The Pick a Disc host. But Gaz Jones from the Track One Side One podcast is the guest for this fortnight. So, Gaz, how you doing?
I'm very well, my friends. How are you?
I'm good. I can hear things, which is great. It's always great. So,
always a bonus in the audio format.
Yes, and being able to hear things, I think, is a privilege and fortunate that we can do. Like listening to music, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So, yeah.
Wonderful.
So you've brought a disc. You've picked a disc for us to talk about today. So let's get to it. So, Gaz, why don't you tell the lovely listeners the disc that you've picked for us today?
My disc. Well, I say my disc. I'm actually holding up my original cassette that I bought in 1994, still going strong 29 years later. And the disc that I've picked for this week's episode, mate, is hot take, the greatest album ever recorded. It's an album called Troublegum, and the band is Therapy.
Yeah, so why have you picked Troublegum?
Well, it's the greatest album of all time, isn't it? It's an album that has never left me from... Even now, I mean, it's 29 years. It was 29 years old last month. It came out at the start of February '94, and I still don't think there's a couple of weeks that go by where I don't listen to it again. And I still get as much out of it now as I did when I was a little spotty teenager with a lot more hair than I have now.
So it's just a case that you just need to kind of talk about this album because it just will not leave you alone. Is that the case?
I have no issues with it leaving me alone either.
Lives rent free in your head, and it's welcome to stay there. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm paying it rent.
So when was the first time you'd either heard of either Therapy or this album?
The first time I heard Therapy, it would have been about June 1993. When they released what was the first single off this album, Scream Major, which was part of the Short Sharp Shock EP. And it was a top 10 smasheroo. And I saw them do it on Top of the Pops.
Okay.
And I will never, ever, ever forget that day.
Ah, okay. So how old were you then, if I may ask?
I was 15 in 1993.
So you're watching Top of the Pops, and you listen to this. Was this music a genre of music you was familiar with? Is this a left field? Was this you suddenly discovering something new? Do you know what drew you to?
like I'd been starting to get into heavy music since about. I mean, obviously, 1991, you had Metallica, the Black Album, and you also had Nirvana, Nevermind. You had Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. You had Bad Motorfinger, Soundgarden. You had Pearl Jam 10. All those albums were released within like a couple of months of each
Hmm.
other. And Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. I think all those albums came out in about July, August, or August, September 1991. So I started to get into kind of heavier music and more kind of like alternative stuff, like heavier, riffy kind of stuff. I was
Hmm.
starting to venture more into the heavier side of things. I discovered Sepultura in about 1993 when they were on The Word, which was The Word was essentially my musical education. I got into so many bands through The Word, be that Nirvana, Sepultura, and such like. But I'd always had, even from a young age, I'd kind of had this. I mean, I've always had this absolute musical obsession. But even from a young age, I I was a sucker for a hook in a pop, like a pop song. It could be anything. I don't care. It's all good as far as I'm concerned. You know, when a pop song like has a great hook, there is nothing like it. And that was the thing that hit me most about when I first heard Scream Major by Therapy on that Top of the Pops appearance. Because for me, Scream Major is essentially a pop song. Yes, it has massive buzzsaw guitars and it's very kind of metallic sounding, but the roots of that song are pure pop. And there's just something about it, that chorus, I've got nothing to do but stand around and get screwed up on you. And the whole kind of screw that, forget about that. It just kind of tapped into all my kind of teenage angst that I was feeling at the time.
So you started listening to kind of the heavy music before Therapy then. So
Yeah.
was it top? I mean, was it Top of the Pops that got you into that as well? I'm trying to. I've just got the image of like Metallica just suddenly appearing on Top of the
Yeah,
Pops for some
well, to
reason.
be fair, I mean, I do remember Metallica being on kind of Top of the Pops. Top of the Pops at that sort of time. I think they just got like a new producer, this guy called Rick Blaxill, I believe his name was. Um, and all of a sudden, yes, Top of the Pops is obviously still massively promoting, the pop stuff, be that, Take That or the, Snap and all that kind of cheesy dance stuff like
Hmm.
Hadaway and whatnot. But they were also starting to get in kind of rock bands, like same sort of time as I first heard Therapy. I first heard the Wild Hearts, and again that was on Top of the Pops.
Okay.
This kind of sort of heavier, kind of punky, metallic kind of rock music, but it had massive pop hooks, and this kind of stuff was starting to kind of filter through into the mainstream.
93 had it, I keep getting I keep getting the name confused with the album of theirs that came out in 2003. Is it Earth versus the Wild
Oh,
Heart?
yeah. 93 was Earth Versus. The one in
Yeah,
2003 was The Wild Hearts Must Be Destroyed.
Destroyed. Yeah. Okay. I think I started listening to them. I think when I discovered Hey Hello, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure Earth versus the Wild Hearts was also around. I'm assuming the same time as those albums you said as well. So
It was,
yeah,
yeah. The Earth Versus came out in '93, and yeah, obviously Troublegum, yeah, was like the start of '94. But both were like kind of hand in hand with.
mm.
Basically they were like the only two albums I really listened to for about 2 years. No word of a
Okay.
lie. Um, it was like the summer of '93 and '94 because I kind of changed schools like halfway through secondary school, and my parents moved to Ely in Cambridgeshire, and I started hanging out with a guy that I'm still really good friends with. We've been in bands together over years. I've got a guy called Trevor Fuller, and all we listened to. It's funny because like whenever I hear either Earth Versus or Troublegum, they're both intrinsically linked to playing Road Rash 2 on the Mega Drive. They kind of went hand in hand, you know.
No. Yeah, I think I
That's
had
basically all
that
we
feeling
did.
at
That's
times.
about all we did for a year was just played Road Rash 2, win enough races so we could get the Diablo bike. I think that was the fastest bike on the game, and just listen to Earth Versus and Troublegum.
So how was you discovering new music? Was you reading magazines? Was it radio or was it how did you eventually break out from those two albums? Was it
obviously this is pre-internet time, so print was still a
Yeah.
very powerful thing. I'd always buy Kerrang every Wednesday. Wednesday was Kerrang day. It always was for,
Hmm.
I bought it for the best part of 20 years. But I was also buying the Melody Maker because I was starting to kind of search out the more kind of, I don't know, weirder alternative stuff. Like it was around that sort of time, or maybe the year after. I got massively into bands like Pavement and Mudhoney, Jesus Lizards, all this
Hmm.
kind of weird stuff that was coming out of America at the time, and obviously Nirvana as well. But I would always, I'm sure lots of people similar sort of age to me would have done exactly the same thing. I used to have a stack of like TDK C90 cassettes by my stereo, and I'd always record the evening session. I'd record John Peel, and I'd
Hmm.
record the Friday Rock Show at the time. So it like when you're a teenager, you're kind of soaking up kind of everything like a sponge, And I
Hmm.
loved it all. I never understood this because it was very tribal back then. You had your metalers, you had your grungers, you had your ravers, and never the twain shall meet. In this kind of pre-Spotify world, everyone kind
Yeah.
of sneered at each other, but I loved it all. I was listening to Public Enemy. I was listening to, I don't know, Def Leppard. I was also listening to Pavement. I was also listening to Sepultura, and I loved it all, and I couldn't understand why everyone was sort of sneered at each other's music, and I was just like,
Mm.
and I I was getting so much kind of like the Melody Maker and the Enemy and Kerrang and stuff. They would be like my like Spotify, you get recommendations. I would see like a glowing review of an album that I'd never heard of before. I'd go down to my local R Price, see if they had it, and I would ask them to put it on so I could listen to it on the listening posts. Ask your parents, right? And obviously we didn't have MTV in the house. Dad refused to have a satellite dish on the side of the house, so thanks, Dad. But obviously it was Top of the Pops. Jules Holland's The Word was still going at the time, and then there was the White Room after the Words. There was a lot of kind of exposure for bands on telly back then, a lot more than there is now, especially for like alternative bands. Um,
Mm.
and it would just simply be a case of you'd watch these shows and then you'd be talking about it at school the next day. Oh, did you see Nirvana on the Word, or did you see Therapy on Top of the Pops and stuff like that?
Mm. Okay,
Um,
like what trading cassettes and things like
exactly,
yeah,
making each other mixtapes and stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think I just missed that. I think I just missed that. So I never, apart from perhaps kind of, I think reading my sister's smash hits. Um,
Nothing wrong with smash hits,
yeah,
mate.
yeah. And I think just like commercial radio, I didn't really have like I never got into the magazine stuff. But yeah, I was just I think I just missed that. I think CD I kind of I think I started getting into slightly music when I got my first CD player in about 95, 96. So I kind of just missed out on that. But so before we move on again, so we're going to be talking about Therapy, and for those who are unaware, Therapy are a Northern Irish rock band from Larne, formed in 1989 by guitarist vocalist Andy Cairns, drummer vocalist Five. Is it Five? Five Ewing.
Fife Ewing, yeah, he was the
Five
original
viewing,
drummer. Yeah.
yeah, five viewing. They recorded first demos, and they recruited bassist Michael McKeegan. They signed with A&M Records in '92. Released four albums with them. Blah 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 blah. One of them being Troublegum, and there's a lot more stuff, but we won't have time to go through that in detail. But
It's a long career.
yeah, but I think they. I'm assuming from what I gathered, they had a few members come and go.
It was only drummers, really. Well, the drummer, I think they've had three drummers. The latest drummer, Neil Cooper, he's been in the band since 2001 or 2002. They had a cellist.
Okay.
He was a cellist slash rhythm guitarist. He left the band. He was in the band from about 94 to 2003, I think. Yeah, but it's the lineup's been stable basically since 2003, I think. So yeah, and they never stop. That's the thing that regardless of if I didn't even like Therapy, I'd always respect them from all those bands from that mid-90s Brit rock period, be that, Skunk Anansie, the Wild Hearts, Terrorvision, all these, bands. They all at one point or another split up. But Therapy never did. They never did. It kept going.
Yeah, and just to explain to listeners as well, it's Therapy ? So there is the question mark after Therapy. So it's Therapy.
Therapy?
Yeah, Therapy. So yeah. So I'm going to be trying to refer to Therapy as if it's the end of a question. So yeah, my knowledge of Therapy is very, very, very limited. I don't think I actually listened to them or really heard them much until a couple of years ago when a friend of mine asked, "Oh, have you ever listened to so and so?" And I'm like, "I've never heard of them." So and I never really kind of listened to them. So I was coming in, I think, based on the people who I've known talked about them, and I think the age of them, I was coming in with a very preconceived notion of what I assumed was going to sound like, or what bands they might. There's going to sound like bands that influence bands who I think there's going to sound like. So doing this podcast, I've kind of heard like bands from perhaps before I kind of re-listened to music, and I'm like finding kind of, oh yeah, they influence quite a bit of what I listen to. Like for example, Nirvana or Pixies or something. Going, okay, that grunge sound is something that I really kind of listen to. So I was thinking like, okay, I've always thought that Therapy influenced some of these bands, and I'll reveal those in this when we talk about the album in general. I'll reveal what I was expecting it to be. So I was always assuming there was kind of them, but I never really basically got off my arse to listen to them. So I was so I made kind of like baseless claims. Oh yeah, I probably won't get into them because I'm assuming they're just saying like this, blah blah blah, like the obnoxious prick I sound like. But yeah, but other than that, I was coming into this completely blind, no idea what to expect apart from what I thought I was going to expect. So yeah, so that's my kind of history with Therapy. So
Therapy.
yeah. So yeah, so you pretty much like introduced me to Therapy. So
I'll take that.
Yeah. So I think as we talk about the album itself, I was because for some reason I was expecting something along the lines of either Glassjaw or At the Drive-In, that kind of hard rock, kind of very kind of almost screechy, erratic kind of post-punk stuff, or at least, and I think there's arguments to say that there probably is influences in this, but I was fully expecting it to be the kind of like genre of post-punk that I'm kind of scared to listen to. Yeah, I've got a friend I've got one of my close friends wants to cover a Glassjaw album on this one day, and I'm kind of really scared.
Oh, which one?
Worship and Tribute, is it? Or
Oh, I think you'll get on with that one a lot better than you will with the first album. Was Everything You Ever Want to Know About Silence? That's
okay.
That's a nasty, hard. It's hard work listening to that album.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You got to put the mileage in. Worship and Tributes is the one with the pop bangers on. So
right. Okay. But yeah, and I was and I think that in the driving, or at least that kind of screechy, kind of almost fighting melody, and that kind of post punk, which is kind of like something that I'm not particularly into, or I struggle to kind of get with the stuff. And I was quite surprised. One, because I had to tell myself this was '94, and I was quite surprised as you said, and I was quite glad you brought it up. It's a lot poppier than I expected it to be. Yeah.
It is. I do genuinely think that there are massive pop elements in this. Hence why all 5 singles that came off the album all reached the top 30.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, I was listening to this, and I'll bring up. I've written Trans Vision Vamp more than once in my notes, which is something I wasn't expecting, considering what I assumed there was going to sound like just by what I thought they were, by kind of like third party expectations. I never expected to be reminded of Transvision Vamp during this, but there's a very interesting thing that I noticed in that because what 94 this was, and this is where my kind of knowledge of kind of rock music at this time kind of falls a bit. Cause there are bits of almost industrial music
Yes,
into
there are.
this, like so.
Especially regarding the drums.
Yeah, yeah. There's I don't. There's almost not synthy, but kind of almost synthy sounding guitars in it, which
Yeah.
like harken back to late 80s kind of new wave, which is where I got this Transvision Vamp stuff. Like I think there's a couple of times there's a few riffs that I was expecting Wendy James to go at one point. At one point,
That's all
in
it's
that.
missing.
But yeah, I was quite surprised at how kind of poppy and accessible it was, or easy to listen to it was. I was expecting to be, I was kind of like anxious about it at first, but so I was kind of blindsided by that in a good way. So
I mean, you know, there's a reason it sold over 1 million copies. This album, it's yes, it's hard and heavy, but the corners have been rounded off, and there's enough kind of pop hooks for people that might sometimes be a bit scared of this kind of music to like take for example songs like Scream Major, songs like Nowhere. Nowhere to me it sounds like, I don't know, Stiff Little Fingers meets Thin Lizzy. And there's enough kind of hooks in those songs for casual kind of, I don't know, radio listeners to get into the songs. They're so instant. I don't think, I think the longest song on the album is, I don't know, 3.5 minutes. Most of them are kind of sub like 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, that threw me for a second as well. But yeah, and I can kind of, and there's like kind of other bits and stuff. Like I feel like there's elements of not like early pop punk, as in, but like not in the kind of noughties pop punk, but at one point I thought I heard kind of Offspring. I think Scream Major actually reminds me a bit of, I think, Smash by Offspring.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But I mean, obviously, this was kind of pre that, because like Scream Major was recorded in '93, and Smash obviously didn't come out until mid '94, I think.
Yeah. And but I can kind of hear kind of like elements of stuff like, oh yeah, there are parts which I think, like, if you add your kind of turntables and a bit more electronic, you get Linkin Park in places, but then realizing that Hybrid Theory is only 6 years. I just kind of there's only 6 years between like Hybrid Theory and this, which is,
I know,
bizarre to think
it's
about.
Crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. The rock scene in the 90s moved so fast. 6 months could seem like 6 years.
Yeah.
And that's something I wanted to talk about later in regards to when Therapy came back in '98, and it was a completely different world to the rock scene they'd left in '95.
Yeah, but I think, but I can kind of feel here, kind of how the album seems to be. Is time capsule the right word? Because time capsule. What the fuck? Time capsule. I don't know whether time capsule is the correct word, because to me, time capsule, I don't know whether the term like time capsule, I've always seen it as a good thing, because it says, oh, this is what this kind of something was like at the time. But then, like, does it suggest something's dated? But I don't feel this is dated. I feel this is kind of like a nice kind of, particularly doing the podcast, this is a nice kind of tent pole into, like, this is what rock music was like, or what people were capable of doing at this time.
No, I completely agree with that. I think Troublegum is a perfect snapshot of like the punk world, the alternative world, and the metal world clashing in 1994 with this complete mishmash of styles. And I think it's a perfect snapshot of that, of where kind of like metal and rock and alternative music was at the time. You started getting these bands that were bringing in all these different kind of influences from all over the place and just throwing them at a wall. More often than not, it was a lot of British bands that were doing it. You know, the Wild
Okay.
Hearts is a perfect example of that. They did that brilliant mix of like Metallica riffs with ABBA choruses. You
But
know?
yeah, I think again I think when I first started listening to the Wild Hearts, it's probably like 8 or 9 years ago. I think it was
Mm.
whenever the first High or Low album came out. I think
Yeah, that was about 2010, something like that. 2011, maybe a bit after that.
yeah, yeah,
2012. Yeah, yeah,
some around that time. Yeah, I think it might
yeah,
actually might be 2012. I think
yeah.
it might have been because I can remember visiting a friend in Liverpool and driving up the motorway, listening to that album about 3 times in a row. But
Swimwear was what a song.
oh, that's a proper banger. That is, yeah, and
Yeah,
only three,
and
yeah, three chord banger.
yeah, yeah.
But then I remember going back and someone saying, "Oh, give the Wild Hearts a listen, give the Wild Hearts a listen," and I'm like, and okay, thinking that perhaps it was going to be slightly harder, and Halo was going to be Ginger Wild Hearts pop phase, and then listening to this Destroys All and Earth versus the Wild Hearts, going, this is pop punk about 20 years before pop punk came out,
Yeah,
and being
yeah.
quite surprised. And I still feel like I shouldn't be as surprised at how poppy some bands are some bands are, or yeah. And I think
No, yeah,
again
no,
this one,
yeah, no, yeah. I completely agree. Those bands like Therapy and the Wild Hearts, because this was kind of like my formative years also of like starting to learn. It was hearing bands like Therapy that made me want to play guitar and be in a band, and the Wild Hearts as well. Um, and I think there's something so perfect about a brilliant pop chorus with a massive wall of guitars,
yeah,
distorted guitars behind it.
yeah.
That still gets me off now as much as it did when I was, 14 and 15. I'm a sucker for it. I'm an absolute sucker for it, and I'll never get bored of that melding of, like sun-drenched harmonies over serrated riffs.
I think now kind of my music taste is delved into, and I always bring this up into what Spotify would like to call bubble grunge, which is kind of like the bubblegum pop / grunge stuff. So you got kind of your more pop with kind of like grungier elements and stuff. So bands like Couch Party or Dead Pony or anything like that have got a very kind of pop choruses laced in kind of like a grunge aesthetic. Quite a few Wolf Alley songs
Oh
have
yeah.
that sound and stuff, and because Wolf Alley is one of my favorite
Mm.
bands, and that combination, and always that combination of genres and unashamed kind of ABBA choruses, as you say.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, full hook and sinker as well. Yeah, I'm kind of glad I'm starting to discover that there are kind of elements of like an alternative scene that unashamedly like embrace the popness. I mean, as
Yeah.
as I've covered Pixies and Nirvana in the past, like Kurt Cobain was just like, yeah, I love pop music, and
Yeah.
Nirvana was, and openly admitted Nirvana was a pop band.
It
uh,
was a pop band,
yeah,
Um, and again, I don't, I generally don't think bands like Therapy or the Wild Hearts would probably not exist, but like I certainly don't think they would have been signed to major labels hadn't it not been for Nirvana, you know. And yeah, like you say, I suppose it was kind of Kurt Cobain that kind of made it. It's okay to write pop choruses. There's
hmm
nothing wrong with liking pop music.
yeah,
Like when Nirvana headlined Reading, what was that, 92, 93?
yeah.
And Nirvana basically curated the main stage lineup that day, and opening the main stage was Bjorn Again at the request of Kurt Cobain.
Yeah,
That says it all. You
yeah.
know,
There's I think a kind of semi-viral video that's gone around lately where I think Dave Grohl's talking to, I can't remember who he's talking to. I th-
oh, is that the dude from NERD? About talking about
yeah,
the drums?
yeah.
Yeah,
He's like
yeah. When he
basically
just rips off the Gap band
yeah,
and
and
all
just
that.
nicked
Yeah,
it
with
from
the
disco and
flans. Yeah,
stuff. Yeah, and again,
yeah,
just like
yeah,
disco music and stuff, and
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I just kind of like this more openness and apparently not kickback from majority of people from it, which I'm quite appreciating. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
or either that, or my kind of social media is hiding all the rock snobbery anyway. But if yeah, so but I think I say we're coming up to about half an hour. Let's move on to talk about some of the songs. So
Okay.
I'm gonna so Gaz, which song do you want to start us off with?
Well, I think we got to start off with Scream Major, really. The opening salvo. Obviously, not the opening track. The way this album flies out the gates with like the first 6 songs. For me, and I'll die on this hill. There isn't another album that opens as strongly as this for me. You've got Knives. The way it goes from, you must hide the knives, and then it just kind of stops and goes to knives, and then it goes straight to the drum, and you got that kind of, I don't know, that almost like upside down biscuit tin snare, like ting ting, and it cuts through, and it's so simple. Scream Major is such a simple song. It's 4 chords. But it's all about kind of dynamics where it first starts off with that. They do that kind of like I don't know if you've heard of a band called Helmet. They basically it's kind of the Helmet trick where it's just like almost like you do like 3 palm meters on the guitar like that, and then the 4th hit of the bar is a snare hit, so you go it's a classic kind of Helmet trick. Page Hamilton, incredibly underrated guitarist. Again, a massive influence on Therapy. But then it kind of wraps up again when the next guitar riff comes in. Again, it's so simple. It's just played on the top 2 strings, and then it comes in with the melody line. And for me, like a guitar lead line, you should be able to sing it. And I've been at a heck of a lot of Therapy shows over the years. And when it gets to that bit, and the whole crowd's just going na 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 na, and it's so kind of simple. It borders on kind of like a nursery rhyme kind of melody or something, like almost like a playground children's melody. It's so simple, but so catchy. And then fantastic lyrics. With a face like this, I won't break any hearts. I think I like that. I won't make any friends. And then the whole kind of, and then like the whole kind of like call and response. Screw that. Forget about that. It's
Yeah, I think the lyric person in me, like, I think if I knew considering some of the stuff that I kind of listen to, that's a very self-deprecating opening line, which I really quite like. Actually, it's a very good way of opening line. It's like, as you said, like for example, Knives at the very start is something. At the very start says my girlfriend says I need help, and then my boyfriend says I'm better off dead, which is like
dead.
Yeah, very kind of 2 very sharp, punchy kind of 2 lines to get you in and stuff. And the self-deprecation in me really likes that opener. But yeah.
I think this was a time in my life where I got self-deprecation. I'm like, yeah, this is a bit of me.
Yeah.
Even when I was, 15 at the time.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think this is the point in the album where I was like, okay, this is not what I was expecting. This is kind of more like proto pop punk, more or less.
It is. It is with a dark edge.
Yeah,
and self-deprecating lyrics. But if you strip it all away, and I've seen Andy Cairns, the singer of Therapy, do solo acoustic shows, and this song works just as well with just him and an acoustic. You're playing it Johnny Cash style. It just works.
Yeah, I can picture that. I think like 3-4 chord pop punk songs, they translate so well to acoustic guitar.
Oh, big time.
Kids to start, and yeah, I can imagine that. But I completely agree. I think it's I think it's like the opening statement for the album, even though it's the second track. That's the one that kind of like says it settles you in and gets you an idea of what to expect, and again, completely blindsided me. So yeah, I think I can totally see how 15-year-old Gaz was like, oh,
Uh,
the best music
yeah,
ever.
I'll completely. I couldn't hold those horns any higher. I mean, the thing for me is like the way this album opens with Knives, which is an incredible statement of intent, but for me it shows the quality of an album when the second track is even better than the first, when it just ramps it up again, and then you're like, right, strap in, this is going to be good.
I'm going to refer to this a couple of times, actually. There's a Kerrang interview from 2019 where they go through each song track by track with the band.
Yeah.
And I think Andy Kansas said that on the Screamager, it's I had the riff before I was even part of the band. I'd written it, I think, when I was 16 or 17 on bass. In the various bands I'd been in, I never had the chance to use it. When we wrote a song called SWT, it was a riff at the end. We recorded that in a studio in Lurgan. The guy had a Fender Twin, and I was completely obsessed with Bob Mole's guitar tone. I said, look, here's the closest I can get to Bob Mole. Can you help me out with this? And I always thought, this riff doesn't go on enough. I'm a bit of a pop guy. I always think if you got something really melodic, it should feature prominently in at least a couple of times. Which, yeah, I think just like kind of,
there you go.
That's his mindset from what we've been talking about for the last half an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think there's a couple of other quotes about this song from other members of the band, but Andy comes back and says, so the stabs, the da 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 da, we got that from Helmet. We were huge fans, but we still needed something
there
else.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I haven't actually got this article up.
Yeah.
I've just been saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, but as soon as but I was just quickly breezing through that, and it says like, we got that from Helmet. I was like, yeah, you're completely on the money there. So but yeah, that's the kind of opening gambit of Troublegum with,
and it still is. I mean, 30 years ago, the single came out, and it still is their signature song. I mean, it was their biggest hit. Top 10. Even in '93, it was quite a surprise that a song like that got in the top 10. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
especially back then, you had to sell it. You had to sell quite a few records to get in the top 10.
You know what? So when was that single released?
It was 1993. I think mid '93, or maybe early spring '93, something like that. Yeah.
You know what? Out of curiosity, where's the official charts.com? Because I'm quite curious.
Yeah.
Because what I'm quite curious as well, I want to find out what was number one. I want to know what was number one at the time.
I was trying to think now. I mean, '93, it would be, I don't know, would it be Take That or Snap, Rhythm as a Dancer or something like that? Maybe, I don't know. I'm interested to know. I'm interested to know what else is in the top 10 actually.
Can't see Screamager in the.
Oh, it would have come up. It was part of an EP called the Short Sharp Shock EP.
Yes, I can see that.
Got it?
Yeah.
Got it? Yeah.
Short Sharp Shock.
But obviously, Screamager was like the lead track on it.
Yeah. Peak position number 9.
Number 9, yeah.
Yeah, so that's 20th. So I'm going to go and that's what the 20th of. I'm going to edit. I'm going to edit all the silences out so people.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to keep this bit. I'm going to keep this bit in because I like it. Yeah. The live researching. But so it's 20th of March, 1993. 20.
Oh, okay, it was March. Okay, it was better than I thought.
20th of March. 1993.
It's mad that that came out in March, and it was basically 11 months before the album came out.
So when's that? 14th of March to 20th of March. Actually, the EP was number 9 in the top 10. Yeah. So you know what? I'm going to go through the whole top 10 because this top 10 is very interesting. So
let's do it. Let's do it.
In at number 10, up 15 is "Too Young to Die" by Jamiroquai. At number 9, new entry, it's the Short Sharp Shock EP by Therapy. At number 8. And number 8, up 24 spaces to number 8, up 24 spaces in a single week, is Informer by Snow.
Lick a Boom Boom Down.
Yeah. Number 7, down 5 is Little Bird Love Song for a Vampire by Annie Lennox. Number 6, down 4 is Are You Gonna Go by May? Go by May. Are You Gonna Go My Way by Lenny Kravitz. At number 5,
Decent
down.
riff.
At number 5, down 3 is Given to Me by Michael Jackson. Number 4, up 9 is Stick It Out by Right Said Fred and Friends.
Oh, good God.
Prob-
That's comic relief, wasn't it? Must have been.
Actually, you know what? There's a big red splatter, tomato splatter on the album art, so it possibly might be. So,
Oh, my, yeah.
so and interestingly, this is the top 3 is very 1993. And number 3, up 12 is Mr. Loverman by Shabba Ranks.
Shabba.
Number 2, number 2 knocked down 1 off number 1 top spot is drum roll. No Limit by 2 Unlimited.
Oh, good God.
And up 2 spaces, knocking off No Limit by 2 Unlimited is Shaggy with Oh Carolina.
Wow.
So,
Of course, 1993 it was Reggae Summer, wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
all Chakademus and Bitty McLean and...
yeah, so this is just
Yeah.
this is just like kicked in and stuff. So
Doesn't Therapy just literally stick out in that top 10? Well, apart from, well, I mean, Lenny Kravitz is obviously a rock song, but, you know, yeah.
I mean it's
Mad. It's a mad top 10.
yeah, but I mean it's but man, I remember being really obsessed with that No Limit song because I was 7 at the time. Yeah.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. That's
But
fair.
yeah, so that's
Wow.
yeah, that's just great. I've never done that with the songs before on the podcast. That was an interesting diversion. But
Yeah, that was really. Oh my! But do you know what? Regardless of what I think of most of those songs, I can still remember them all. I remember all those songs.
some I can't
You know?
remember. I don't remember that Michael Jackson song at all.
Yeah, that's the one that's got Slash on it.
Oh right.
That was I don't know. God, that was about like the 8th single off Dangerous, I think.
Oh right. Okay. Yeah. I think I only know about like 3 or 4 songs from each album. But yeah. Oh, Carolina, I remember that. But yeah, Informer would then go up to number 2 the next week. Actually.
Yeah,
So,
I did go to number 2.
Yeah, but I think, and as much as that might be an interesting tangent, I think going back to what we was talking about, it's quite interesting to see how that managed to get to number 9
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
on the list. And I can't think of anything close to that on the.
I mean, I can pretty much guarantee, with almost 100% certainty, that Screamager wouldn't have got any daytime airplay on Radio 1.
Mm-hmm.
Even a session would have played it, obviously. I mean, they did a lot of John Peel sessions early doors. The Rock Show would have played it. But like in terms of like, you know, especially back then, in order to get a top 10 hit, you had to get daytime radio traction.
Yeah.
Really, you had to, you know. Yeah. It's still... I still find it so surprising, especially now that when you just read through that top 10, of like, you know, what people were buying in early 93.
I mean, like again, and as funny as I mean, I've got a soft spot for Informer.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Same. We're both
Yeah.
singing from the same hymn sheet, mate. It's a banger.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where people like go, and then they listen to it, and suddenly you just like singing along.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think it's. I think that was probably because of radio play and stuff.
Yeah.
But unless it was it on a TV show? Was trying to figure out whether it was like the 1993 version of Viral. If it was on an advert, if it was on an advert, I'd probably explain it. But
I think it might have got decent rotation on MTV. Because especially because I mean back then you got to think, you know, 1993 MTV was still like full grunge alternative. You know, you got Nirvana, Alice in Chains, and Stone Temple Pilots, and it would have kind of fitted in with all that kind of stuff. Metallica as well, obviously, and bands like Megadeth and stuff. Yeah,
but yeah, so that was the slice of life. Just over 30 years ago. So
Yeah.
I'm just
Mad.
depending on when I launched when this episode comes out, that was pretty much quite possibly 30 years and a month ago. So
Crazy.
don't ever say that I don't do a very indirect and anniversaries of things. So where do you want to move on to next?
I mean, next I think we've got to go to. Well, I think we should go. Actually, no, go "Die Laughing," which is track 6.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of the first time on the album where they kind of take the foot off the gas a little bit. It's a slower song, but again, it's all about those kind of dynamics. Again, it starts with a snare hit and a cymbal, and it's kind of slow, almost. I don't know. There's a little bit of krautrock in there. There's a lot of Joy Division. Obviously, there's a Joy Division cover on this later on in the album. But then it goes into when the big guitar comes in. Again, it's just 3 chords, D, C, and G.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it could topple a building. But the production on this album is incredible. I mean, Chris Sheldon is one of my all-time favourite producers. And he was kind of like producer du jour in the mid-90s. He did everyone. Feeder Therapy, Terrorvision. He did, most of the Brit rock bands, and again it has that wonderful kind of. Again, it's a massive pop hook. I think I've gone insane. I can't remember my own name, and it's just something. All their choruses are almost like, I don't know. They're almost like terrace chants in a way. Beer swaying arm in arm. And then it goes into that kind of joyfully out of tune kind of guitar solo, which is borders on white noise at times, but it works so well. And the way the solo wraps up and goes back into that kind of coda that and I would kill for a good night's sleep. I'm feeling dead, and it's so, I don't know, deliciously dark and joyous. I think there's a bit of kind of goth. There's a bit of goth undertones in this song as well, I think. And again, if I could choose an MVP for the Troublegum albums as a whole, it would be Fife's drumming. I think the drumming on this album is unbelievable. It's kind of industrial meets hip hop meets punk, jazz. It's not your standard. It's not AC/DC drumming. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As much as I love AC/DC drumming, it's almost like a lead instrument. It's on it of itself, or maybe it is the lead instrument.
I'm kind of playing it very, very quietly as you was talking, and the first half, I think the song seems to feel like it's traversing through different genres and of things that have gone in the past. So like there are parts. I mean, I think the way he performs it is very Cobain-esque in terms of his voice and very kind of Nirvana stuff. But the strumming, strumming stuff. If I've suddenly found if Mark Hoppus suddenly said that he listened to this album and this song.
Yeah.
That kind of very kind of palm muted strumming at the start, feels like it's influenced like quite half of Blink-182 singles. That sounds that kind of that palm muted. The guitar tone's slightly different, but if you probably could have told me it was a very early Blink-182 demo of them experimenting with stuff, I would have believed you because that's very pop punky kind of stuff, and I was like, that's cool. That's kind of cool, actually. And then they said that, but then it kind of traverses into something very unblink-like in terms of almost kind of like industrial kind of rock solo coda beats before coming back to perhaps inventing pop punk. Like 6 years earlier. But no, it's the kind of genealogy of what's in the song and the sound of it is, I think, very, very interesting in terms of what it's doing with the kind of sound and how it kind of drifts and plays that line of different influences. Yeah, it's very kind of interesting song in that respect, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this was, I think, the fifth single off the album, and again, it got top 30, maybe in top 20. I think this was released to coincide with their appearance at Donington Monsters of Rock in '94. I think that they were on maybe second band of the day, and because like back then, obviously, like Monsters of Rock was still very much denim and leather,
Mm-hmm.
and Therapy, they had short hair, and I think the rock crowd were a little bit sniffy about your bands like this getting in Kerrang, and Kerrang was starting to kind of touch on like the Prodigy and stuff like this, and more kind of alternative stuff, and leave your Motley Crues and your Poisons behind. But I remember listening to because Radio One that year, they did like a full day's coverage of Monsters of Rock, and I remember recording lots of individual sets. Sepultura were there, like Terrorvision, the Wild Hearts. I think Aerosmith headlined. I remember recording Therapy's set, and I rinsed the tape so much it literally just like disintegrated in my Walkman. But it's fantastic, and the crowds just went balmy for them, and that was the moment I think when I realised they're not my little band. They're kind of there's a lot of Therapy fans out there, And then they came back the following year and they sub-headlined Metallica. That's how big Therapy got at the end of this cycle, the end of the Troublegum album cycle. Come the summer of '95, they were main support to Metallica. They were above Slayer, they were above Skid Row, they were above Machine Head. Yeah.
Above Slayer.
Above Slayer. They were main support to Metallica.
Wow.
That's how big it got. It was mad. Looking back, it's mad. That it got that big at the end of the cycle.
Okay, I think on UK ground, I can probably see them that being higher than Slayer. To be fair, but I mean, still thinking that's still kind of mind blowing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. I remember thinking at the time, I was like, "Oh my god, wow, that's so awesome that my favourite bands were that high on the bill." But the way it went from there in the summer of '95, to there, literally a few years later, the fall was. I mean, it could be attributed to kind of so many things. I think they took too long releasing Semi-Detached, which came out in '98. They released a fantastic album in '95 called Eternal Love, which was great. But then they basically went away for 3 years. I mean, and like I was talking about earlier, like the rock scene they left in '95, which was very much kind of prime era Brit rock. You had Skunk Anansie, you had Three Colours Red, Terrorvision, The Almighty, bands like this. So when they came back in '98, where it was all of a sudden it was Limp Bizkit, it was Korn, Slipknot was kind of just around the corner, and a lot of the British bands had broken up by this point that they were kind of like lumped in with in the mid '90s. And I think literally a couple of weeks after Semi-Detached came out, the lead single was off that was Church of Noise, which was a hit again. I think literally 2 weeks after that, their label A&M folded, so they were literally without a record label. This band that had main subbed Metallica a couple of years beforehand were now without a record deal, and no one was interested in them anymore.
Wow, that mind blowing.
Except me. Except me. Yeah.
Wow.
It's there's a lovely guy called Simon Young, ex-Kerrang journalist. He wrote a Therapy's autobiography, which came out a few years ago, and that was the bit I was looking forward to most to reading in the book, was those kind of what happened, because they literally disappeared. Because again, it was something we were talking about earlier, like pre-internet times. I found out what my favourite bands were doing through reading Kerrang, through reading Metal Hammer or Enemy or whatever, you know. And if they weren't in there, I would kind of naturally assume that if they weren't touring, well, they'd split up. And Kerrang kind of dropped Therapy like a stone in '98.
They weren't cool. Like they weren't the cool people anymore.
No. Well, they weren't wearing red baseball caps and wearing Adidas shell toes, and doing it all for the nookie.
Yeah, yeah, like
That was always, I don't know. Yeah. As much as I love Kerrang. Obviously, I worship Kerrang. I'll defend Kerrang to the hilt. I do think they were kind of, well, I suppose a majority of the press was like this, grabbing onto the next kind of hype, whilst kind of dropping what went before like a stone.
Yeah.
I mean, they did it, as soon as grunge hit pay dirt, obviously they immediately stopped covering, Warrant and Skid Row and, the hair metal band Cinderella and stuff. And then as soon as grunge got oversaturated, they stopped covering that and they started covering, Therapy and the Wild Hearts for a few years. It was all Brit rock, and then all of a sudden it was new metal. And then obviously, that got ridiculous. And then they latched onto, it was the bands, wasn't it? The garage bands, the Hives, the White Stripes.
Yeah, and then it was then it was the indie boom. Then wasn't it? It was Franz Ferdinand, the Killers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just couldn't. I don't know. I just couldn't believe what, because Kerrang championed Therapy for about 5 years. They were literally in every issue, be it an interview, a live review, an album review, whatever, in the news section and stuff like that. And it was, I just couldn't understand why at the time. Looking back, of course, I realised why. But they never split up. And there was an interesting quote from Andy Cairns that I read a few years ago that they said if they'd split up after Troublegum, if they'd left it like 10, 15 years and come back, they'd probably be headlining Reading. They'd probably be as revered as like when the Pixies came back.
Oh, okay.
I do genuinely, and I think there's something to that album's so big, and it did influence a lot of bands after that. I do generally think that, not just the bands I was in, who desperately just rips off Therapy wholesale. I do genuinely think that they'd be held in much kind of higher regard than just the kind of hardcore fans. I do generally think that.
Is there an actual equivalent of someone who's done that, like a band that split up then came back? I'm trying to.
I mean, Pixies is a kind of perfect example for me. I mean, they came back and headlined Reading.
Yeah.
At the drop of a hat with no new material.
Yeah.
And they were kind of, rightfully so. Everyone was bowing to them, going and losing their mind when they started playing Monkey Gone to Heaven at Reading and stuff like that.
I think we covered Doolittle a couple of episodes ago, actually. And I think one of the things that came up was that they had pretty much, splitting up increased their fame, more or less. They came up.
It did enhance the legends.
Yeah. So So it's a very weird thing in that you've got some really hard-working bands who are like work for years and for decades to get to a point. You've got musicians who are touring to this day who are now, who've like, you look back and they've been together for like 15, 20 years. At a certain point, or more popular than they've ever been. I can't think of any. I can't think of any examples, even though I know there's loads. There's loads, but then you've got some that like kind of work hard, then kind of either slip or just take too longer, just don't capitalise on momentum, then collapse, and then just like forgetting about, which I think sounds like what happened to Therapy, even though they never broke up. And then you've got the Pixies who broke up, become mythological, and then come back.
mythological. Refused was another one that Refused broke up,
Yeah.
and in like the mid to late 90s, no one gave a crap. You know, I think there was like 3 people at their last gig or something. But the amount of bands that ripped off The Shape of Punk to Come wholesale, insert band here, be that Out the Drive and be that 100 Reasons, anyone.
I think Million Dead. I think didn't. I think
A Million Dead. I mean, they're named after a Refused song. And obviously Refused came back, and rightfully so, conquering heroes. I mean, it's something I kind of allude to a few times on my podcast. Is I have no issue with bands reforming. No one sells records anymore.
Yeah.
So get your ass out on the road. I love the fact that Faith No More were gigging again and Refused and At the Drive and all these bands, amazing bands that I loved. That I never got to see first time rounds. Well, I saw Faith No More, but yeah, I didn't see Refused and At the Drive. My biggest issue is when they start trying to scratch that creative itch again, thinking they can capture that lightning in a bottle again. I'm still so scared that, I don't know, I don't think it will happen now, but when Rage Against the Machine first reformed, I was so scared that they were going to try and do some new music. Because it would have been so bad. Millionaire rock stars. You're not 20 anymore. I mean, obviously, Refused to have done 2 albums since they reformed. Neither of them have been very good. The Faith No More album I thought was quite poor. The At the Drive one was okay. Was it as good as Relationship and Commands? Hell no.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that especially bands that influenced a lot of bands after them, like At the Drive and Refused and stuff. I love the fact that they came back and did a victory lap round the block. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not go and play to packed audiences at festivals and stuff? Why not?
Oh, just to get that kind of atmosphere they probably never got when they were actually formed the first time, because you have like people like coming stuff. I think either, because I'm not even sure when this is going to air, depending on episodes. So I'm either just about to, or have gone and seen a band called Help She Can't Swim, who in London, who are reforming for the 20th anniversary.
Wonderful.
But they broke up in 2008, a week before I discovered them. And
mate, timing.
Yeah. So when they
wow.
But I think so they announced a gig on, I think, like in a day in April, and I'm like, yes, I've got that. Book the travel lodge. Need to still book the trains. And I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going. To the point where it's sold out, and they've actually now added a second date the day after.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but
Amazing.
but they're a band that I was so gutted that I learned they'd broken up a week after I discovered them and stuff. So it's like, yeah, and I think that's going to be a bunch of people who either saw them the first time round, on the verge of everyone on the verge of 40, trying to be 20-year-olds again.
Yeah. I've got. I'm going to a similar gig to that in a couple of weeks' time. I'm going to see Curb Dog.
Yeah,
doing their 25th anniversary of their second album, On the Turn. And yeah, it's just going to be a bunch of basically white men in the middle 40s with bad backs.
Jumping around for the first 3 songs and then just going, oof.
Yeah, you got it.
Having a rest for the slow bits, and then when they start playing the hits near the end, like jumping around, and then regretting it but not really regretting it the next day.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't wait. Can't move, but I so guarantee I can. But that's I think that's an interesting tangent. I mean, I love the tangent stuff, but it's an interesting tangent I wasn't expecting to go down, actually. But the kind of like the idea of the legacy bands coming back together stuff. So Therapy are still touring now, aren't they? Are they?
They are. Yeah, they've got a new album coming out later this year. That they were meant to celebrate their 30th anniversary when COVID hit. They had a big 30th anniversary tour planned. It was called So Much for the 30-Year Plan. This is when that autobiography came out that I was talking about by Simon Young. They did a live album in Abbey Road, like re-recording all their top 40 hits. I think it was like 12 top 40 hits they've had, which is pretty good for this weird little kind of industrial noise rock pop metal band from Ireland, and yeah, and obviously that was delayed for a couple of years, but I know I have a very good authority that, the new album is ready to drop anytime. They actually recorded it, I think, 2 years ago. And I've heard reports that it's absolutely fantastic and the best thing they've done in years. Which I think is a bit harsh, because I think they've never done a bad album as far as I'm concerned, but I think that, especially the last like 4 or 5 have been absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And not enough people have heard them. But you know what? I'm fine with that, because they've gone back to being my little secret band. If you know, you know.
Okay. So I think in terms of the reception of the album, it was rated the top album of 94 in the 1000th issue of Kerrang in 2004. Album was number 31.
So he was.
Album 31 in Kerrang's 100 Best British Rock Albums of All Time. And it was shortlisted for the 1994 Mercury Music Prize.
Yep. Do you know what it lost out to that year? I do. I can save you looking.
So I've got it. Wow, I would not expect that.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the listeners?
Well, it's M People.
Yeah.
Elegant Slumming.
What? I was going to have a quick look at what.
Prodigy were in there as well, I think, when they Jilted Generation was shortlisted.
Well, I've just had a look, and One Night in Heaven and Moving On Up are on that album. I'm like, you know what, fair play. I love those 2 songs. But
I've no issue with Mike Pickering as in the M People, because he basically brought acid house to Manchester.
Yeah.
I've got no problem with that. Incredible DJ. I just have a massive problem with M People. I don't know what it is. I can't quite, because all the signs are there that I should like it, because it's kind of soul-y, funky pop music, and I should like that, because I really, really like Jamiroquai. Probably more than I should. But there's something about M People. Maybe it's the fact that they won the Mercury. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the point where Teenage Gaz was like, no.
Therapy should have won.
Therapy with Robs. Boom.
Then again, though, like, there's. I mean, looking at some of the competition I've got the Wikipedia page now.
Yeah.
Some of the competition. I mean, there was some really tough competition that year. You got Park Life by Blur, His and Hers, Pulp, Music for the Jilted Generation by The Prodigy.
Yeah.
Give Out but Don't Give Up by Primal Scream.
Good album.
Everything Changes by Take That.
Pop bangers. Pop bangers.
Yeah.
That should have won it instead of M People.
Actually, Everything Changes. What's on that album? That's
Pray. Everything Changes. Babe.
Relight My Fire.
Relight My Fire. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. That should have won. That's a better album. Objectively speaking, that's a better pop album than M People. It just is. It's got Pray on it, for goodness sake. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, and and I think everything changes. I never realised that Robert Williams was the vocalist on that for ages.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
To be fair, I didn't realise that Heather Gordon was the main vocalist, and Never Forget either, because he sounds so much like Gary Barlow.
Yeah, I know, right?
But,
yeah, it's a little soft lisp that gives it away.
Reviewed quite well. Got 4.5 out of 5 in All Music, 8 out of 10 in The Enemy, 3 out of 4 on the Los Angeles Times, and a B in Entertainment Weekly. But I can't find anything else.
I've actually got the I've actually got the Kerrang review.
Ooh,
yeah. Funnily enough, I only got 4Ks. Considering it was Kerrang's album of the year, 1994. I only got 4Ks. I'm convinced it got a 5K review. It was reviewed by Phil Alexander, who was the editor at the time. And I mean, the whole review is just kind of gushing, frothing at the mouth about how incredible it is. Yeah, it's still only got 4Ks. Um, but like in terms of like the albums of the year, like the top 5 albums, Kerrang's album of the year, 1994. Like you've got Therapy, Troublegum at number 1, Soundgarden, Super Unknown at number 2, which is possible. Is it Soundgarden's best? I think it is. It's one that's got Black Hole Sun on it, and Spoon Man is wonderful. Number 3 was Machine Head, Burn My Eyes, which is fantastic. Number 4, The Black Crows, Amorica. Number 5, Killing Joke, Pandemonium. There was a lot of good albums that year. Yeah, Terrorvision, Stone Temple Pilots, Beastie Boys, Ill Communication, 94, Pearl Jam, Vitality, Green Day, Dookie. You might have heard of it.
Oof, perhaps.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't. Have I listened to that all the way through? I don't think I have.
Oh, Dookie.
Yeah.
Well, I like to. I do like to listen to it every now and again. I listen just to remind myself that Green Day used to be decent.
I think,
but to be fair, we are 3 generations of Green Day fans in now, so it's not for me, which is fine.
I think I made the point that I think I've got friends who are just a few years older than me who would prefer Green Day over Blink-182, but I'm a Blink-182 over Green Day, and I think it's because I'm just a couple of years later.
Age.
Yeah,
depends on the age, man. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think it was I think if I was a couple of years older, I probably would have been Green Day. But
you would have been.
Yeah,
definitely.
but I was
hands down.
But I was 13, 14 when Enemy of the State came out, and yeah,
perfect age.
Yeah,
perfect age. I saw Blink at Reading on the Warped Tour stage in about '98. It was around the time of Damn It, so it was the original. But it wouldn't have been the original. I think Barker had just joined. I think. And they were on quite early on the Warped Tour stage. I'd got there because I think Lagwagon were on afterwards. And I really wanted to see Lagwagon. I saw the last 10 minutes of Blink's set, and there's barely anyone watching them, and they were just doing, to be honest, the same shtick that they do now, and just really obnoxious. Couldn't play, couldn't sing, and I just remember they went off, and I was looking at my lanyard because you get all the set times. I was like, who was that? Blink. I was like, they're probably the worst band I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, do you know what? That'll be the last we ever hear of them. A year later, All the Small Things drops. That's why I'm not an A&R man.
I think I can't remember the author. There's a book, Kill Your Friends.
Oh,
is it John Niven? I think.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, a good friend of mine recommended it to me recently.
Yeah, I remember reading it. Yeah, I think eventually, I've not seen the film actually. I think Nicholas Hoult plays him, but basically it's a 1997 A&R guy who just basically like Patrick Bateman. If Patrick Bateman was an A&R guy who's just like an insufferable prick, drug taking and stuff. But he's an A&R. But there's an ongoing joke where he describes like seeing certain bands or artists, and right, he's just like, yeah, they will never, those are shit they'll never get, and they're all quite recognisable. So like, there's one bit. I think there's one bit where like he talks about these kind of like 5 girls with like distinct personalities, and he goes, yeah, then they won't. Yeah, no one wants vibrant, colourful pop personalities. They won't go. Yeah, and like he passes
Amazing.
on. He passes on. I mean, that's not how the Spice Girls actually made, but the joke's on there. So like, there's I think he does it with a few other ones. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, he kind of misses these massive things because he's just too much of himself and stuff. But
brilliant.
Yeah, and
brilliant.
Whenever everyone talks about A&R, I always think of Stephen Stalfox. But
amazing.
Have you ever seen? Well, you've answered the question, but let's talk about it a bit more detail.
Yeah.
Therapy live. Have you seen them live?
Yes, many, many, many times over the years.
Do you know how many? Do you know exactly how many? Or?
More than 12, less than 20, I think. First time was at, I'm trying to think now. It was the Corn Exchange in Cambridge. They always used to play Cambridge. I saw them in Cambridge a bunch of times. I I actually supported Andy Cairns at an acoustic gig about 10 years ago, which was incredible because he came up to me afterwards and said I sounded like Chuck Reagan, who was a singer from Hot
Yep.
Water Music. And I was like, I'll take that. I was like, yeah, I'll die happy now. I mean, and Andy's lovely. I've had him on my podcast. Yeah, he's an absolute gentleman. But every time I've seen therapy, I've never seen a Duff Therapy show. They're always kind of pushing forward with their music, but they also kind of know that there are going to be kids in the crowd where it's going to be their first therapy show.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I don't know, going to see Motorhead. As much as I don't really want to hear Ace of Spades, there's going to be a kid in that crowd who's there just to hear Ace of Spades, and they'll be disappointed if they don't play it, And it's like, the therapy will, invariably they will end on, Scream Major and Nowhere and, the hits or whatever. But it's always just so much kind of fun and loud. It's so loud, hellishly loud.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, well, there will be, obviously, they'll be touring when the album comes out, and I shall be going to see them for the first time in a few years now. I think the last time I saw them was about 6 years ago. I was going to see them on the 30th anniversary tour, but then, a little thing called COVID happens, and, and then I was meant to see them last year, but my girlfriend's car died, so we couldn't make the gig, unfortunately, which is a little bit of a shame, but what can you do?
Okay.
Have you ever seen Therapy live?
No, I haven't.
Okay, next question.
So yeah, I'm saying this is like this album was the first time I really listened to them. So
yeah.
But
would you want to see them live?
I'd be interested. Interested too. I think. Yeah. But
I mean, next year is obviously the 30th anniversary of Troublegum. I can pretty much guarantee they will do a Troublegum tour next year.
I'll be interested in that.
So,
but I think before that, I perhaps would want to check out perhaps some of their other albums, which conveniently means that it's that part of the podcast I asked a question about other albums. So, okay, someone like me or anyone else who's perhaps listening to this episode checks out the album, wants to venture forth and listen to other Therapy albums. Where would you suggest they go next?
Well, the thing is with Therapy, it depends what you like. They've done, because obviously they did an album and 2 mini albums before Troublegum. There was Nurse, which is very kind of cold and industrial. They did 2 mini albums before that, which are essentially like Steve Albini kind of noise rock.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you love Troublegum, I would highly recommend the follow-up album, which is Infernal Love, which came out the following year, 95, which is, it kind of tones down the kind of buzzsaw guitars, but kind of pushes the more kind of like sweeping gothic kind of melodrama to the fore. There's much kind of sort of much darker lyrics. There's some incredible songs in there, like Stories, Loose. They do an amazing Husker Du cover on cello, a song called Diane, which is amazing. I mean, in terms of other ones, I would say High Anxiety from 2003, which is kind of seen as a bit of a comeback album. They reunited with Chris Sheldon, the guy that produced Troublegum, and it's very much an album in the Troublegum vein. Kind of buzzsaw guitars, big pop hooks, massive choruses, 2.5-minute songs. And then after that, I'd probably say their most recent album, which came out in, I'm trying to think now, 2018, 2019. It's called Cleave. And actually, it was the first time in many years they actually got a bit of traction. They were getting daytime airplay on Six Music, which was lovely to hear in the van. Oh yeah. Steve Lamacq adored the lead-off single from that, and yeah, it's kind of everything that makes therapy, they've kind of siphoned into this new album. It's got a bit of the noise rock stuff. It's got a bit of the weird stuff, but it's also got the pop hooks and the melodies. Infernal Love from '95, Hang Anxiety from 2003, and Cleave from 2019. But like in between there's another 10 albums which I haven't even touched. Which vary from, I mean, like 2001's Shameless was basically like a dirty rock and roll album. It sounded like Turbo Negro meets the Hives, meets the Misfits. And then they did one in like 2004, Never Apologize, Never Explain, which is just kind of like a gnarly noise rock album. But like the way I see it is like, if the kind of poppy hooky therapy is not really your kind of thing, just wait till the next album, because they're bound to do something really nasty and horrible and gnarly. But if the nasty, horrible and gnarly stuff isn't your bag, just wait for the next album, because it will be another Troublegum-esque pop banger.
Oh, okay. So I might just delve into a couple of those just to see how they go forward.
Please do.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to know what you think.
So we're getting to the end of our chat, Gaz, and but before we do, we need to answer the very important question, which is the song for the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. So for anyone who's not listened to this before, what this is, I'm going to ask Gaz to pick one song to be immortalised forever on the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist, and I can't veto it. Whatever Gaz chooses goes. So Gaz, you got one song to pick. Which song are you going to put onto this playlist?
Well, I think it's going to have to be. I mean, it's a straight up knife fight, really, between two songs. But I'm probably going to go for Nowhere, because I was listening to the album today in the van at work, and it got to track 5, Nowhere, and the sun came out. For the first time, I was like, "Spring's coming, man. Spring's coming. The nights are drawing out." And there's just something so joyous about the song Nowhere. Plus, it's got one of the greatest opening lines in history. Heaven kicked you out, you wouldn't wear a tie. Wonderful.
Okay.
So, yes, Nowhere.
Yeah,
Nowhere.
So Nowhere joins the list of ever-growing songs on the Spotify playlist. So,
Wonderful.
Yeah, so with that, we are now at the end of our chat, Gaz. So, before we say goodbye, can you tell the listeners where they can find you online and a bit about your podcast?
Sure. Well, my podcast is called Track One Side One Podcast, where each episode I get people on to dissect and discuss their top 5 all-time album opening tracks, basically ripping off High Fidelity. And it's as the series has progressed, it's almost become less about what song they pick. It's more about the story behind it, about where they discovered the song, and the conversation goes off on all sorts of tangents, like our chat has this evening, and it's wonderful. I've had some incredible guests, like journalists and authors. Like I've had Kerrang! Legendary journalists like Dom Lawson, Ian Winwood, who's just released an amazing book called Bodies. Seriously, go and check that out. I've had the lovely Ross and Wojciech from 90s Legends Symposium. Wonderful lads. Andy Cairns from Therapy. I've had Giz Butts from The Prodigy and Jana Stark on season 1. Just loads of people. We're sort of coming up to like 50 episodes now. Just whatever podcast provider you use, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, whatever. Just search for Track One Side One Podcast. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. Just search for Track One Side One Podcast. Come say hello. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I think you've just quite recently as well. You've had like frequent annoyance to me. He's been on this podcast 6 times already. Colin from We Dig Music.
Yeah. The lovely Colin Jackson Brown. What an amazing chat that he knows his onions, man.
Oh my god!
What a good old boy he is. He's absolute good old boy.
He's a walking Wikipedia of music.
Yeah.
But yeah. So he's been on Pick a Disc at least 6 times. So and he's So he's been on So he's been on this a few times. But he's also But he's also part of the podcast network. We're also on as well.
Yeah.
So any long term listeners, just check out the Collins episode because it was a really good episode as well. You also had my friend Ben on B-sides.
Benjamin Size. Oh, you know Ben.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh God, I've known Ben for a long, long time. But I've been involved with like the Cambridge music scene. Not so much now, but up to a few years ago, like playing in bands in Cambridge for years and stuff.
Yeah.
And Ben's an absolute gent. What a songwriter! What a songwriter!
He will eventually be a guest in this podcast at one point, but he's also he's also had one of his albums as a picked disc. So we've actually
really?
So
so he's officially famous now then.
Yes, he's officially famous.
Wow,
yeah. So his friend Dan, who might know as Heartwork, picked. Picked that disc like many years ago actually. So please do listen to Track 1 Side 1. I've listened to a few episodes now, and I really do quite like. As you said, I'm a fan of tangents, and particularly the stories of how to discover the artist, because there's a lot of nice, interesting crossover from the stories you get from the stories that I get as well, and that I love that stuff. That's like you with pop. That's you and pop hooks. It's me and kind of personal stories of how people discover stuff. That's like catnip for me. So fully recommend that podcast. And with that, we are at the end of our chat, Gaz. I just want to say thank you ever so much for coming on and introducing me to therapy, the band, and not actual therapy.
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 Mate, it's been an absolute honour and a pleasure. And literally, I can talk about therapy until the cows come home.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/WeMadeThis. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
You know what's tricky sometimes? Picking who is going to win at the Oscars. You have to get yourself to a cinema to see all the movies, or at least have all the possible streaming services to make sure you don't miss a single one. You have to pay attention to all the precursor award shows to see who's winning so far. The Golden Globes, the BAFTAs, they're the pretty obvious ones. But don't forget the Critics' Choice Awards, or the SAGs, or the DGAs, or the PGAs, or the Eddies, or the Gothams, or the AFI Top 10, or the National Board of Review. Ugh, exhausting, right? Or you could just join me for Academy Watch on the We Made This podcast network. I'm the host, Bo Nicholson, and I've been reading the trends, keeping stats, and seeing as many movies as humanly possible, and I can tell you who the big players will be on the big night. Me and a different guest each week will also be dissecting one of the key movies each season, including giving out personal awards and diving into them thematically. Will Everything Everywhere All at Once remain the frontrunner and win Best Picture, or will a film seize the momentum late in the season to storm home, like Coda did last year? Time will tell, but what I do know is that as it happens, you'll hear it on Academy Watch, wherever you get your podcasts.